Okay, seems like it's working. Om Jnana Timinandasya Yananjana Shalakaya Jakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sahorito Gurai Pushpavanto Chitra Sando Tamarudo Vandeyam Shri Ramakrishna Abhaya Charanasago Sukado Paramanando Sundaro Subhalapriyo Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Okay, so here we are again, continuing with our exploration meditations on Prahlada and his simple-hearted devotion. We've divided Prahlada's simple-hearted devotion into kind of four main qualities that we've explored: his detachment, his not wasting time, which we explored last class, his universal compassion, which we'll explore this class, and in the final class we'll explore his one-pointed devotion. So a brief recap of last class. We talked about how we were looking both at Prahlada's character, how he engages himself, relates with others, and also his precept, how he speaks, how he talks, how he shares his realizations. And we talked about how these two should combine, they should go together, they should ornament each other. And we see that in Prahlada. So kind of through these classes, we're looking at both Prahlada's character and his teachings. We talked a little bit how Prahlada did not understand people of the world. They just didn't quite add up to him. In his simple, innocent, naive heart, he couldn't understand the duplicity, the maliciousness, the friends and enemies kind of consciousness that he saw. But yet, despite not understanding people, not being able to relate in all ways, he still felt immense compassion for their plight, their suffering, this duality that they were experiencing. We'll kind of go more into that today. We also looked at how Prahlada was not very busy in one sense with active service. So we talked about the need for personal reflection, processing, digestion of kind of our engagement in Swarup Siddha Bhakti, taking time to integrate that, reflect on that, identify with that, and all that implies. And lastly, we also talked about how the stages in our life will distract us in different ways. These different stages as a young teenager, adolescent, adult, elder, will get caught up in different things. And so as a sadhaka, one has to be very skillful, dynamic in how to engage oneself in those different stages of life so that one can continually progress towards one's ideal. And we talked about in kind of a microcosmic way how those three stages of life, the impressionable stage could be like, they could be seen in the context of like one single day. Like the impressionable stage of one's early life could be like the morning, and how it's good just to take as much mercy from Sri Nam and kind of direct angas of bhakti as we can in that impressionable stage. And in the middle of the day could be kind of connected to more active adult life, kind of more engagement with the world, with people, and so forth, and trying to kind of connect that back to the sitting. And then the final stage, the evening, could be connected also in a microcosmic sense to the kind of reflective elder stage of life, where we kind of take all the lessons, the realizations that we've imbibed and learned through our day, through our life, and kind of really put those in place and express our gratitude, and for all those that helped us put those in place. So that's a brief recap of last week. We talked about how Prahlad didn't waste time, but used his time very effectively. So we'll continue on. This is kind of the next component we're going to look at of Prahlad's simple-hearted devotion, and this will be focused on his compassion. So I guess we'll get right into it. We're looking at the 5th chapter here of the 7th canto, where it kind of first becomes apparent that Prahlad's not really going to follow in the ways of Hiranyakashipu so easily, after he kind of speaks to his dad about the uselessness of pursuing these things of the world. Then his teachers, who Hiranyakashipu appoints to try to educate him in the ways of the world, they ask him, "O best of your family, has this pollution of your intelligence been brought about by you or by the enemies? We are all your teachers and are very eager to hear about this. Please tell us the truth." So that's the 10th verse. And then we'll look at the 11th verse here that Prahlad responds with. Shri Parad Uvacha Parasvas Chetya Asad Graha Pumsam Yan Mayaya Krita Vimohita Diyam Dishtas Tasmai Bhagavate Namah. Translation. Prahlad Maharaj replied, "Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose external energy has created the distinctions of my friend and my enemy by diluting the intelligence of men. Indeed, I am now actually seeing this, although I have previously heard of it from authoritative sources." So one thing to note here, kind of just on a basic level, that Prahlad says is the cause of this duality of his teachers, these asuric individuals, the cause of their vision, their kind of duality of vision of seeing friends and enemies, is the covering of the external energy. And this kind of connects back to Prahlad's naivety, his innocence, his not really understanding the ways of the world that we explored last week. He says, "Indeed, I am now seeing this. I am actually seeing it, although I have previously heard of it from authoritative sources." Um, so he basically, in a sense, like it's astonishing to him to see this kind of distinction that so clear cut that these teachers of his are giving of friend and enemy. And he says, I've read about this in authoritative sources. I've heard of it. I've heard of it from Nard and so forth, but now I'm actually seeing it. Um, so in one sense, you could say it's not in Prahlad's heart. This is kind of he's kind of coming in touch with this, coming to understand of it through his engagement with others. And his reaction to it is pretty interesting. When he sees this duality, I mean, he goes on to kind of condemn it for different reasons, but initially he says, Tasmai Bhagavate Namah. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's his reaction to seeing this duality. He immediately connects it back to his Ishtadeva and kind of sees this as a Shakti, the external energy, this diluting potency, the power of this, and kind of the immensity, the power of it is what gives him some, creates reverence. Just from seeing this, it creates reverence in him, reminds him of Krishna. It kind of reminds me of the story that Guru Maharaj tells of how Prabhupada asked him, have you seen the New York woman? And Guru Maharaj was a new sannyasi. And so he didn't really know what to say. He thought Prabhupada was testing him, seeing, because sannyasis, traditionally not supposed to engage with the opposite sex. So Guru Maharaj didn't really respond. I didn't know what to say. So Prabhupada kept going and said, they're so beautiful, so beautiful. And all these men are so attracted to them, and they're working so hard to get their attention, working night and day. And because of their work to get their attention, all these buildings, all these skyscrapers, they were looking out over the skyscrapers of Manhattan or New York somewhere. And Prabhupada said, and these skyscrapers are all the creation, all the manifestation of that lust. And Prabhupada's eyes got really wide, and he said that this is Vishnu Maya. And Guru Maharaj is just saying there, just stunned how Prabhupada could see something in the ways of the world, this kind of duality of vision, and the exploitation of men trying to exploit women and get their attention, and working so hard to do it, and how all of this just reminded Prabhupada of the immense power of Vishnu's external energy, and is kind of created reverence and kind of a natural, spontaneous connection to that. So we're going to look at this duality that Prahlad talks about here. This duality of friends and enemies, creating distinctions in such a manner externally. Prahlad brings this term up a lot, friends and enemies. and how that um, um, will really thwart one's sincerity and ability to approach Bhagwan um, and please him. Um, this vision is a a big obstacle in that. It doesn't. It's when we create such external division. It's really hard to approach service in a simple, straightforward, and sincere manner, because we always have kind of duplicitous like mentalities, tendencies, and will lack trust, lack compassion, and um, these types of things that are so central to bhakti and to pleasing Krishna. So Prahlad goes on in the next verse. So first he kind of states the issue. This is the problem. The problem is finding distinction between friends and enemy um, based on one's deluded intelligence created through the external energy of Bhagavan. And then in the next verse, the 12th verse, he goes on, well, how do we get out of this? How does one transcend this duality of vision? Um, how does one no longer see friends and enemies? And Prahlad says, Sa yadanuvrata pumsam pasu buddhir vibidyate anyesha tatanyoham iti beda gatasati. The translation is, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead is pleased with the living entity because of his devotional service, one becomes a pandit and does not make distinctions between enemies, friends, and himself. Intelligently, he then thinks, every one of us is an eternal servant of God, and therefore we are not different from one another. This is Prabhupada's translation. Um, so, one interesting note initially is Prahlad says, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead is pleased with a living entity, one is then able to transcend the duality. So Prahlad's immediately kind of directing us towards a descending path. Um, he's not advising one to engage in kind of yogic gyan, more ascending, effort-based practices, but he's immediately directing us towards seek mercy. If you have this duality of vision, direct your attention towards that sector of mercy. That'll help you transcend this, and in how? By you please God, and your vision of duality of the world will dissipate. So we could say how does pleasing God result in the dissipation of duality of vision, seeing friends and enemies in the world? Well, in one sense, we could say mercy begets mercy. Pleasing Krishna means Krishna showering some mercy. I mean, Krishna Krishna showers mercy regardless, but you could say especially to those who kind of get his attention by pleasing service. Krishna is going to be bestowing immense mercy on that individual, mercy that they don't deserve, even though they're pleasing Krishna, they're offering their heart and so forth. The mercy they're going to receive. And it's not like this is some formula, but it's like Krishna every single time decides, I want to give more mercy. It's not like you give one, Krishna gives 10. Sometimes it's talked about like that. You take one step towards Krishna, he'll take 10 steps towards you. But it's a way of just saying he chooses each time. It's not like an automatic process, but each time he chooses, I want to take. He's moved by that so much. So when one receives that that mercy, way beyond what one gave, it extends itself naturally, and even though others may not deserve this or deserve that, naturally that extension of mercy will be extended to all living entities. We could say also pleasing God means deep connection with God, deep connection with Krishna, who is the underlying source of all consciousness. So through pleasing Krishna, we're coming in touch, kind of intimate connection with the underlying thread, underlying essence of everything, of all consciousness, all living beings. Is this source, this center is kind of like the missing link in the life of one who has this duality of vision. It's kind of like the bridge that expands and connects every living entity, every jiva, with another. It creates a very intimate bond with others through Krishna. And this connection, you could say there has to be a component, a strong component of unity, of oneness, in a sense, with another living being. And so in this, Prahlada expresses the oneness, the non-difference, that when one pleases God, the connection, the oneness, the unity that one will feel in connection to other living beings, to all jivas. And of course, there's a dynamic unity in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and and Prabhupada's translation kind of conveys that. He kind of goes above and beyond the actual words. The actual words basically just say distinction between you and others is destroyed. Kind of simple as that. But Prabhupada goes on to say, one will think every one of us is an eternal servant of God, and therefore we are not different from one another. So Prabhupada's kind of expressing, you could say, this dynamic unity that we see in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. With Krishna, we have Beda Bed, or Krishna and his Shaktis are Beda Bed. He's one and different simultaneously with his Shaktis. But we could say even within the Shakti, like even within the Jiva Shakti, we have Beda Bed, where we have underlying connection, underlying consciousness with all other jivas. This kind of oneness where at the same time we remain, we keep our individuality in service. And so this kind of the abed tattva, that is so central to Gaudiya Vaishnavism and to the Sambandha Gyan, that we cultivate the relationship we have with Krishna, with other Shaktis, and oftentimes the Bade has been stressed to kind of create some distinction between our school of thought and monistic schools of thought, which kind of are more non-dual in a very absolute sense of the term. Our school of thought is non-dual in a more dynamic sense. And so to distinguish ourselves from them, sometimes the Bade, especially in Prabhupada's preaching and so forth, we see a very strong emphasis on the Bade. But we should remember that both of these two are there, Abade and Bade. Both are just as prominent. The Abade, the non-difference, is just as prominent as the difference, the Bade, between ourselves and Krishna, between ourselves and other jivas. And so Prahlad here is sharing the experience of connecting with other jivas, with a sense of oneness, of a dynamic sense of unity and so forth. And that this vision, this experience, this kind of intimate connection with others that allows one's, as the Gita says, to see the sufferings and the joys of others as if they were one's own. The ability to see that's coming through service, pleasing Bhagwan. And so it's kind of through mercy that this vision's coming. In connection to this verse, here Prahlad again was speaking to the teachers. And then in the next chapter, we see Prahlad speaking to the students. He's giving his longest discourse on the nature of reality, how to engage oneself and so forth. He's sharing with the students, and what he says to them is, this is 624. He says, Tasmat sarveshu bhuteshu dayam kuruta sahridam bhavam asuram unmuchya yaya tusyat adhoksaja. He says, therefore, my dear young friends, born of demons, please, we see that kind of those two things kind of juxtaposed there. My dear friends, born of demons. So Prahlad is able to find deep friendship even amongst the Asuric schoolmates. So he says, therefore, my dear young friends, born of demons, please act in such a way that the Supreme Lord, who is beyond the conception of material knowledge, will be satisfied. Give up your demonic nature and act without enmity or duality. Show mercy to all living entities by enlightening them in devotional service, thus becoming their well-wishers. So, this verse we can see, it's like it has a kind of, we'll go into it, but it has a pretty deep connection with the previous verse we saw. Prahlad's basically saying here, please God by showing mercy and affection, friendship to all beings. So he's kind of coming, we can see that it works, this verse is kind of cyclical. with the previous verse 512 that we just read. In the previous verse, we read that through pleasing God, one's able to transcend duality of vision and thus kind of share mercy, extend mercy to all living beings. And in this one, Prahlad's saying, show mercy, extend kindness, affection to all living beings, because that pleases God. So we can kind of see that each one will kind of augment. By pleasing God, one's able to experience that intimate connection between themselves and other living entities, and thus extend mercy. And through that extension of mercy, one's able to please God. God finds immense that's pleasure, joy in seeing jivas extend mercy unto each other. And so these kind of, similar to how Sanatana Goswami says, humility and prema kind of interweave and augment each other eternally. In one sense, I guess this isn't eternal in the sense that compassion is more relative to the material world, but you could still see how they interweave, intertwined, and one will naturally kind of lead into the next, and will facilitate the next. Extending mercy, you could say the mercy is most prominently extended when Krishna is glorified, when the devotee is glorifying Krishna, or when Krishna is glorifying the devotee. But that's another topic. But in connection to this, this kind of cyclical nature of pleasing God and showing mercy to others, Bhaktivinoda has the famous line in his bhajan, Nityananda Mahajan. He says, Jiva doi Krishnanam sarvadamasar. So Jiva doi, showing compassion, kindness to all living beings, Krishnanam, to meditate, chant on Krishnanam. These two are the essence of all Dharma. So one could say, well, which what should we do first? If we're lacking in both, if we're not able to please God to the extent we would like, or if we're not able to extend mercy to other living beings to the extent that we could like, if we feel some lacking in both, which one should we focus on? Which one should we cultivate first? Should we please God first, or should we show mercy to others? And it kind of reminds me of Guru Maharaj sometimes asks, what came first, the seed or the tree? And in a kind of linear time frame, one has to come first, either the seed or the tree. But in a cyclical time frame, you can say both. Both need to come first. So I think you could say the same thing for pleasing God, showing kindness, compassion to all living beings. Both need to come first. So these two are, again, this beta beta principle, showing kindness to others, pleasing God. These two are kind of non-different, different and non-different. They're kind of they're together. And so we should cultivate, find both growing and nurturing one another. And in connection to what type of compassion we'll be sharing with others. Prabhupada here translates, again, he kind of goes above and beyond, and says, show mercy to all living entities by enlightening them in devotional service, thus becoming their well-wishers. So this kind of makes me think of the two different types of compassion that a devotee is said to express. The first one being the desire to relieve the suffering of other jivas, and the second being the desire to bestow bhakti. And so sometimes it's been talked about that one, the desire to bestow bhakti is the ultimate form of mercy, the ultimate form of kindness that one can share. And yeah, we can think in our own lives. I mean, what type of mercy have we been shown? What mercy has come to us? I think we can understand that we've seen mercy in those who've relieved our suffering, maybe in more temporary ways. We've also seen those who've relieved our suffering in more permanent ways, giving us transcendental knowledge and so forth. And then we can also see those who've bestowed kind of a positive, a beautiful love, bhakti, into our heart. And I think, I think probably every devotee can say the latter, the bestowal of bhakti, is the most merciful gift that I've received. But I think these two should also come together. I think naturally in the heart of a devotee, there's a desire to, you see someone suffering. Naturally, a devotee will want to, will feel pained to see that individual suffering, but will also feel sad that the devotee, that the individual, the jiva, is not coming in, has not come in touch yet, has not dedicated themselves to the service, the loving service of Krishna, of their source, and thereby come in touch with a much higher reality, a much higher beauty, love than all the movements, the sways, the emotional dealings and waves that that we experience in this world. So a devotee will naturally want to help someone in both of these ways. And sometimes one may be prioritized over another. And so Prabhupada's emphasizing that here. This kind of the compassion in which one enlightens another about devotional service. And so these two verses, these two initial verses have mostly been Prahlada talking about compassion in a general form. What's the vision that inhibits one's compassion, that makes the world very complex and competitive and in constant duality, opposition. It's this vision of seeing friends and enemies, of not seeing everything harmoniously working, ultimately under the sway, under the sanction and direction of God, and not being able to connect, to see God, his connection, to not have that bridged, not have the gap bridged through God's mercy. So that's kind of the issue. And the resolve in general is, please God, show, render service to God, and his mercy will descend, and one will be able to transcend this this vision of duality, and one's vision will become more simple, more straightforward, more loving, more caring, which will naturally extend itself, which will then please God more, and one will be in a beautiful cycle. Said that a wheel is kind of the fastest, to create some of the fastest moving cars and so forth. So in that sense, you could say this kind of cycle, this wheel of pleasing God and extending mercy will allow one to progress very, very speedily through the stages of bhakti. But now, Prahlada is in this 9th chapter. Now he's talking to Hiranyakashipu, he's talking to Nrsimha. This is after Hiranyakashipu has been slayed by Nrsimha, and Prahlada's offering prayers. And now he's talking about himself here, which is interesting. We should be very attentive whenever we hear a great personality share their own experience. That will be very illuminating. Anything they say will be will lift the darkness from our eyes and illumine, give us knowledge, spiritual knowledge on the world, how to act and so forth. But personal kind of experience and testimony is very powerful too. It's very intimate and allows us to learn on kind of a different, more experiential, dynamic way. So that can be very useful to take those teachings from great saints. So Prahlad here says, this is the 43rd verse of the 9th chapter, 7th canto. It says, Naivod vijay para duratyaya vaitaranyas tradvirya gayana maha amrita magna chitta soche tato vimuka chitasa indriyarta maya sukaya baram udvahato vimudam. And the translation is, O best of the great personalities, I am not at all afraid of material existence. For wherever I stay, I am fully absorbed in thoughts of your glories and activities. My concern is only for the fools and rascals who are making elaborate plans for material happiness and maintaining their families, societies, and countries. I am simply concerned with love for them. Very nice verse. So we see this similar description of Advaita Acharya in Chaitanya Charitamrita when he calls down Mahaprabhu, as described how Advaita had no lamentation, no suffering. He was Atmaram, completely satisfied in kirtan of Krishna. But he had lamentation, concern in another direction, and with the ignorance, the suffering, as Prahlada describes it through Prabhupada's translation, for the fools and rascals who are making elaborate plans for material happiness. And so Prahlada's feeling immense compassion, love, concern for people who are so absorbed in a direction that's tying themselves up pretty much in their own bondage, imbibing samskars for suffering pretty much. We don't want samskars for suffering. So I think it's interesting to note that one who has transcended kind of personal, any material desire will have our best interest in mind. Such a soul here like Prahlada, one who's not, has no personal motive, no personal material motive. The person won't, even with good intention, one has to be very conscious, or else those motives can slip in unconsciously and possibly get in the way of extending mercy and so forth. So I think we can understand Prahlada's it's transcended suffering, Prahlada's Atmaram, and so naturally his lamentation, his desire to share mercy will be very, very selfless. And so sometimes we can say that one wants to relieve the suffering of others in an attempt to relieve their own suffering. And this isn't a bad thing. I think this is it's a beautiful way. It said, if you're unhappy, serve someone. Try to help someone else become happy. But I think when one is doing so, one should just be very conscious of that fact. One's own kind of personal motive in the extension of sharing, of helping. And I say that because sometimes I think when one tries to extend mercy, while also, if it's not conscious, if one's unconsciously doing so because they're trying to relieve their own suffering by saving others, I think sometimes it can become undesirably forceful or needy or controlling. And this is, it's not always very merciful. Sometimes it can be very off-putting and undesirable, unbecoming, and turn one away, even from bhakti. So compassion, ideally, mercy, is really a free-flowing thing, a soft-hearted thing, something that when one comes in touch with it, one will whether one takes the advice or not wholeheartedly, I think generally one will feel safe. I think one will feel like this person is kind. This person is sincere. I trust this person. It may not be for me, but what they're about is a beautiful thing. So I think, when one's extending mercy, to just be conscious of one's own personal motive in doing so, and in that, giving space for others, giving others the freedom. Surrender and let surrender. So kind kind of. You can't really force faith onto someone. Oh. Signed out. Can you guys still hear me? It just said Zoom I was signed out.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Maybe it's just Padmanabh Swami ending his class. I'll continue. Hopefully it's still okay. Yeah, compassion should be a free-flowing, soft-hearted thing. Prahlad goes on in the next verse, 944. He has some pretty harsh words. This one was hard for me to swallow. He said, Prahena deva munaya svavi mukti kama, maunam charanti vijane na pararta nishta, naitam vihaya kripanan vimumuksha eko, nanyam tad asya shanam brahmato nupusya. My dear Lord Nrsimhadev, I see that there are many saintly persons indeed, but they are interested only in their own deliverance. Not caring for the big cities and towns, they go to the Himalayas or the forest to meditate with vows of silence. They are not interested in delivering others. As for me, however, I do not wish to be liberated alone. Leaving aside all these poor fools and rascals, I know that without Krishna consciousness, without taking shelter of your lotus feet, one cannot be happy. Therefore, I wish to bring them back to the shelter at your lotus feet. So, Prahlad said some saintly persons are only interested, are off on their own in the forest there. I think now it's called kuyogi or something. It's like attached to the forest, attached to being alone. And he said some individuals are only interested in their own liberation. And I think what Prahlad's kind of giving here is, we shouldn't be afraid of the world. We shouldn't be avoiding the world in our seeking God, seeking Krishna. We should always be moving towards something, not moving away from something. Bhakti is the path of attachment, not detachment. That's kind of a corollary. So we're seeking attachment to Krishna, not avoidance of kind of parts of the world. And so Prahlad's saying, I want to share mercy. I don't want to be liberated alone. I want to share my mercy with others and bring them along with me. And one kind of, I say it's extremely beautiful. And we see this, it's almost like Prabhupada's kind of speaking here as well. We kind of see him coming through in this verse, how he kind of came to the West and came to the big cities and so forth and shared just immense amounts of mercy. But I think also, as we discussed before, the more we please God, the more we discover, come in touch, connect intimately with God, the more we can extend our mercy to others. How these two are very concomitant. And sometimes to kind of connect, to really find God, sometimes there's a necessity of creating some space from certain elements, certain movements and so forth from the world. Not necessarily, as we said, not an avoidance, but in a way to seek attachment, connection with God. And this may be even more the case for introverts and so forth. How an introvert may show mercy may differ slightly. How an extrovert shows mercy. You can kind of look at the examples of Prabhupada and Sridhar Maharaj, and how mercy extends itself. You can see even our own Guru Maharaj, how he's very preoccupied with writing, and more of an introverted way, you could say, of extending immense mercy and so forth. And so this verse, I don't think we should um, say it's like an exaggeration at all, but just to qualify it, I think we have to realize that we shouldn't spread mercy at the cost of our own sadhana, because without one's sadhana, without kind of that connection to Krishna, one won't be able to share much mercy. These two things are cyclical. It's through the mercy that we're receiving from Krishna, through our connection, which manifests really through absorption in the angas of bhakti. Through that, we can extend that to others. It's said that Mahaprabhu, I really like this quote, said he was able to reform human character, to change lives through the tears of divine love and compassion. So you can just imagine Mahaprabhu shedding simultaneously tears of ecstasy, tears of prem, the experience of Krishna's love, the intimacy, the sweetness of Krishna, and just tears are said to come out like a syringe out of his eyes. And at the same time, tears of compassion. We kind of see this in Mahaprabhu's stance at Audarya, one hand extended, the Audarya, compassion, one hand up in divine love and prem, lost in Mahabhav. So it's really this connection that's allowing this compassion, this mercy to flow. So again, not avoiding the world, not avoiding, but also being honest with what one needs to maintain and really deepen one's connection with Krishna, to really please Krishna, so that one can please him by sharing mercy also with what one's received. And so one last verse. I know we're short on time, but actually it's 3 verses, but it's all in, it's all in one. And it's kind of what we know Prahlad for. It's what Prahlad's like, kind of like Prahlad's defining moment. So I think we have to share it in connection to his compassionate his compassionate heart, his simple, forgiving, soft-hearted Vaishnav heart. So this is the 10th chapter. So he's still after he's offered prayers to Nrsimha, and Nrsimha is saying, accept a boon. This is my God. This is my duty. You've pleased me so much. I want to give you something. Prahlad says, no, I don't want anything. I have all I need. I'm sitting on your lap, and you're asking me to accept a boon. This is nonsense. So Prahlad says, Varam vaya etate varadesha maheshvara yad aninda pitame tvam adi avidvams teja aishvaram vida marsaisaya sakshat sarvaloka gurum prabhum bharta heti misha dishtis tvad bhakte mai chaghavam tasmat pitame puyeta durantad dustarad agat Bhuttas te panga samdrishtas tara kripana vatsala. So we see kripa coming at the end there, so we know it's going to be a merciful. So Prahlad says, O Supreme Lord, because you are so merciful to the fallen souls, I ask you for only one benediction. I know that my father, at the time of his death, had already been purified by your glance upon him. But because of his ignorance of your beautiful power and supremacy, he was unnecessarily angry at you, falsely thinking that you were the killer of his brother. Thus he directly blasphemed your lordship, the spiritual master of all living beings, and committed heavily sinful activities directed against me, your devotee. I wish that he be excused for these sinful activities. Okay, nice verse. um, so again, we see kind of vexation. Prahlad says, know that at the time of death, he'd been purified by your glance. So yeah, aside from the context of Jai Vijay, we'll just look at this kind of like on its own. He's purified by your glance. He's liberated. Because he committed some offense. So we see he transcended suffering. He's purified. But Prahlad wants more. Prahlad wants really bestowal of bhakti. He wants full forgiveness. He wants Nrsimha to put aside his grudge. He's put aside his anger. He's no longer angry. His anger subsided, but Prahlad thinks Nrsimha is still holding a little grudge. And so I want you to forgive. I want you to bestow bhakti on my father. And we can see Prahlad takes no offense to whatever his dad tried to kill him over and over again. I mean, probably the worst father in history of recorded history. And Prahlad's a young, innocent child, has done nothing, minded his own business. And despite all this, Prahlad has such a soft heart. He not only did he not take offense, but he was concerned that Krishna is going to take offense for this. And so Prahlad's kind of petitioning Nrsimha, please don't hold this. Please don't hold this against my father. Extend your mercy of bhakti. And the devotee is described as the Kripa Shakti of Bhagavan. And I think there's many ways to understand this idea, that the devotee is kind of the broadcaster of bhakti, could be one way. The devotee is going out into the world and broadcasting bhakti, is kind of extending Krishna's Kripa Shakti. It's a manifestation of the Kripa Shakti of Bhagavan. Another way, as we see in this verse, we could say that devotees, the Kripa Shakti of Bhagavan is he's able to excuse the unexcusable. Kind of the soft-heartedness, which again is not different. It's not that the devotee is more compassionate. I mean, the devotee is more compassionate than Krishna, but it's because of Krishna. It's because the devotee is coming in touch with the mercy, the sweetness of Krishna. The devotee is able to extend that overflows. So when one commits an offense, against a Vaishnav. The Vaishnav is, which it happens, unfortunately. The Vaishnav is very, very soft-hearted, doesn't take offense, and really is the ever well-wisher of all living beings, including including the person who offends him or her. And we see this in the example of Prahlad here. His father was extremely, I mean, kind of like, it's described the degrees of offense, thoughts, words, actions. So actions are the highest offense, and his father is just continually trying to kill him. So we see this kind of like the highest degree of offense. And Prahlad just sweeps it under the rug pretty much, just sees straight through it. Doesn't take any of it personally. And one thing this reminded me of was the offenses that were made to Sridhar Maharaj in the aftermath of ISKCON, and things people said about him and broadcast about him and so forth. And one thing that Sridhar Maharaj said was that he fears for the future of ISKCON. And we see kind of this I mean, this same soft-heartedness. Even it's amazing how a Vaishnav can take any situation, and there's always some light, there's always beauty. Even in the midst of Vaishnav aparad, it just brings out a beautiful side of that Vaishnav. So we see Sridhar Maharaj feeling immense compassion, sorrow, lamenting, not because they're offending him, not because he's taking it personally, but he's just, what is this? How is this going to play out for them? Certainly Krishna will not be pleased. Certainly Prabhupada, their guru, will not be pleased. And so I have a fear. I have sorrow for the future of these devotees. And so this heartfelt compassion is really our that's our lifeline to bhakti. And the Vaishnava is able to excuse so much and still continually bestow mercy, just an overflowing cup. So you try to throw like some ink in it, and it's just overflowing with nectar. So the ink comes, everything, and then you just everything flows out, and still nectar's coming, untainted, and still giving mercy. Described like a tree, even as the tree is being cut down with the axe, it's still giving shade to the person who's cutting it. So the compassionate heart that we see here in Prahlad, Sridhar Maharaj, and so forth, is just we should take great inspiration from it. We're in good hands, very, very good hands. And with that, I think one prayer we can offer to the Vaishnavas, Prahlad, Guru, and so forth, the prayer to please forgive me for any offense I have committed, knowingly or unknowingly, and to please soften my heart. Please extend your mercy so that I can extend mercy. Please soften my heart so that I may be merciful with those who are harsh or inconsiderate in their dealings with me. And in this way, the Kripa Shakti of Bhagavan can continue to flow amongst the devotees. So that's all for today. The glorification of Prahlad, Nrsimha, Krishna, and the Vaishnavas. For my obeisances, Vanchakapatarubhyascha, Kripasindubhyevacha, Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Nam. So, thank you to all that were listening. Nice to have you here with me. To all those who may hear the recording, if there are any questions or comments that anyone would like to share, I welcome those now.
Hi, Krishna Prabhu. I just wanted to say how inspiring this class has been for me. You were able to take this this verse, about, Prahlad's father was wanting to kill him in so many ways, and to break that down from that kind of overwhelming scenario into, the different levels at a personal level, a daily level, how it's applicable to our lives is really very inspiring. And I just wanted to share an incident in my life that I think may kind of represent this as well. So I was abused by a family member, and I really considered this person to be my enemy through my life. And then I became a devotee later on in life through my son. And this, through that mercy, I had always been thinking about this incident with this person in my life. And they were a family member. And so through the family, everyone is like, oh, they become devotees. And what does that mean? And, so there was a lot of dialogue around it. And so this incident was something always in my mind that I wanted to forgive. I wanted to not see this person as my enemy. And so through my practice, I was thinking about it, but not actively doing anything about it. And so fast forward, this person, one night I got a call from this person, and they were asking for forgiveness. And I was like, my heart immediately melted. And I'm like, yes, I forgive you. And I mean, it wasn't like lip service. It was true. I felt that true forgiveness, that mercy coming down. And it was really one of the more amazing experiences in my life to have that experience, and to go on for this person to become a devotee as well. And that we had a relationship based upon Krishna consciousness. Mm-hmm. And actually, fast forward a little bit more, when this person was leaving their body, and we were at opposite ends of the country, this person wanted me to be there when they left their body. And so Krishna arranged everything. It was like a 6-hour trip. This person was always already in that stage where they were non-communicative. And I was able to get there and be with that person when they left their body, with Srila Prabhupada chanting, with me chanting, with Tulsi, with Ganga water, with dust from Vrindavan, and everything. And so to me, that is just really shows how that mercy showers down. And it wasn't anything I did, because I wasn't, planning on forgiving this person. It just came, and I think that's the mercy of becoming a devotee. And so that gave me that experience that, yes, enemies, that nobody is really our enemy in that sense. So I just wanted to share that. I hope that was okay to.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing. Beautiful story. Nice to hear how, that bridge was created. That the mercy was able to the person was able to ask for forgiveness, and through your um, mercy, the softening of your own heart, you're just naturally able to kind of confirm, to give that forgiveness. So yeah, thank you for sharing. Um, any other reflections, questions?
Well, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes. Haribol
Can you hear
Sharda.
me? Yeah. Yeah, it's just from last week. I just said that I would include it in this week, but it's not much of a question, but it was just to say that, it was nice to hear last week how you mentioned that, the acharyas over time, have given their time wisely and helped others to do the same, and so that was, I was feeling grateful for that. And also this, I'm glad in this sorry, in this class that you were talking about, the concept of getting rid of division in your mind, and the feeling of oneness. I'm just wondering, if you feel that we could meditate on this and that would help us with the simple-hearted devotion, even though it may be under a certain rasa, say dasha rasa, but it would be a general thing to do, to help us. All the classes you've given show simplicity and purity. So is there a practical thing that we can do to meditate on this? But I do take note that it does involve changing our concept of time as well, as you say, circular and linear and all of this kind of thing, concepts. The delusion of division, it says in one of Juan Mascaro's commentaries of the Bhagavad Gita. And also, I'm sorry if I missed any anything in the first classes about Prahlada's previous life or life after he left his body, and whether that would also teach us some more. Thank you. That's all. Hare Krishna.
So I'm trying to understand the first question you're asking. Is there anything we can meditate on to help us overcome the conception of duality?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Um,
Or anything written, that you've seen.
yeah. Well, I would personally
Included in
direct.
chanting. Sorry.
I would personally direct my attention towards mercy shown, given by the Vaishnavas. Kind of what we explored in this class, the mercy of even when faced with such an adverse circumstance, like duality is presenting itself. You could say, like Prahlad said, I see before me right now what I've only heard about, this concept of friends and enemies. I'd say we can meditate on how the Vaishnavas respond. We brought up the instance of Sridhar Maharaj, how the soft-hearted Vaishnava responds to such a situation of adversity, in which one could so naturally fall victim to the consciousness of friend and enemy. And yeah, I think taking inspiration from the way Vaishnavas conduct themselves. It said that Krishna is like a desire tree, a kalpavriksha, who reciprocates with the way people approach him. So if one approaches him for something, he'll give that. If someone approaches him for something else, he'll give that. As he says in the Bhagavad Gita, I reciprocate according to how individuals approach me. So I think that's another way we could see the devotee as a Kripa Shakti of Bhagavan. They're not only reciprocating with how people approach them, they're giving so much more. Because someone will approach them with a vision of duality. And in that way, their desire is compromised. But the Vaishnava will be able to see beyond that, be able to see beyond the vision of duality. And so naturally, they'll give mercy in relation to how anyone approaches them. So yeah, I'd say to meditate on the Vaishnavas reciprocating with all individuals and the mercy they show, regardless of how individuals approach them and so forth. As far as your second question on Prahlad's previous life, I probably should have researched that before giving this class series, but I didn't. So if anyone is aware of Prahlad's previous life, you're welcome to share. I'm not. If not, I could do some research and maybe share that next class.
That's okay. If you happen to come across it, it's just maybe I should know myself, but I was just curious because it's going to teach us a lot, can't it, about him? Okay.
Yeah.
That's
well, I guess we can say this is his most important life, so it's good we at least know this one. This one we can take lots of gems and teachings from. So, but yeah, I'll try and look up something see what I can find for next class.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you all for joining me.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I appreciate your comments, your time, and we'll continue next week. Next week will be our final class exploring how Prahlad's one-pointed devotion is kind of a facet of his simple heart, and how that really is the center from which all these other qualities manifest from, his one-pointed focus on Krishna. So looking forward to exploring that. Thank you for joining me. And pranams to all you guys. Panchakapatarubhyascha kripasindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namah.
Shriman Kishore Krishna Prabhu ki jai.
Jai.